Good morning. Welcome to Tapestry. Please get your coffee and join us in worship. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, treasures of fame are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You've been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You've been so,
From Psalm 69, various excerpts, a plea for rescue. Save me, God, for the water has risen to my neck. I have sunk in deep mud, and there is no footing. I have come into deep waters, and a flood sweeps over me. I am weary from my crying. My throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for my God. Those who hate me without cause are more numerous than the hairs of my head. My deceitful enemies who would destroy me are powerful. Though I did not steal, I must repay. But as for me, Lord, my prayer is to you for a time of favor. In your abundant, faithful love, God, answer me with your sure salvation. Rescue me from the miry mud. Don't let me sink. Let me be rescued from those who hate me and from the deep waters. Don't let the floodwaters sweep over me or the deep swallow me up. Don't let the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, Lord, for your faithful love is good. In keeping with your great compassion, turn to me. Don't hide your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Answer me quickly.
You, Lord, oh, your mercy never fails me. In all my days, I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, and I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, and I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. The goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able,
God. We are so, so thankful for your goodness. And we are not worthy of your goodness. Help us to be grateful. Help us to show love to others the way that you show it to us. Thank you for bringing us all together again this week. I pray that you'll be with us as we hear your word. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you for attending Tapestry. It's so good to see you all. Tonight, there's a change of venue for small group. It's not canceled. It's just moved because the Blairs are out of town. So we're going to be meeting at the Shake's house at Sally and Nelson Shake. And so if you need address, directions, that sort of thing, you can see the Shakes or you can see Brad and I, and we'll get you information on how to get there. We're only on the second chapter, so you haven't missed out if you want to come. It's not too late. It'll catch up really fast. If you please fill out a Connect card if you're not getting our emails, or follow us on Facebook so that you can keep up to date with all of the information. And as you've noticed, there are no Blairs today. They're on vacation for spring break. So they have left us with a guest speaker, Doug McGarity, and we're in good hands. So we're excited that Doug was able to come out today. And so thanks.
Well, I'm excited to be back at Tapestry today, and I always really enjoy being here, but I have to ask right off the bat before I get into the message, is there anyone here today from Stover, Missouri?
Not today.
The last time I was here, I was speaking and talking about the little town that I grew up in, which, well, if it was in France, they would say Versailles, but they're wrong. In Missouri, we say it correctly, Versailles, Missouri. That's my hometown. And when I mentioned that, all of a sudden I heard this lady's voice from over here on the left say, "I'm from Stover," which is like 7 miles away. Anyhow, it was kind of a bizarre moment. You had to be there. So I'm glad you're here today. I don't care where you're from. And I appreciate Andy Blair inviting me back again. I love Andy and Kate, and I love them. I love their heart. I mean, don't tell Andy I said any of this stuff, but we're both a little bit of sports nuts. We used to play softball together, and so we trash talk a little bit. So I don't want him to know I'm saying anything nice about him, but it's true. I admire them so much and appreciate their vision for Tapestry and for Savannah. And it's good to see all of you. And good to see Dana, and especially it's good to see Brad and Danielle again. And thanks, Andy and Sarah, for leading us in worship this morning. Just before I came up, we watched a clip from the movie Forrest Gump. How many of you watched the whole movie at some point in your life? Yeah. And the clip was where in the movie where the idea for the smiley face image was allegedly hatched, leading to a fad that swept the nation and went around the world. If you're not familiar with that, just think 70s. You know, long time, greatest music era ever. But anyhow, a lot of stuff happened in the 70s, most of which we probably don't want to talk about. But there were smiley faces everywhere. In fact, I actually have a picture somewhere of me. I started to go and I thought, no, I'll never find it. But it's there. There's a picture of me in the 8th grade on the last day of school, wearing a gray t-shirt with a yellow smiley face on it. And it was, I mean, smiley faces were all over. They had these little cloth type things that you could sew into your jeans or whatever, smiley faces. It was a fad. It was just everywhere. So right now, we're going to do a kind of a group exercise, an audience participation thing. What are some other fads that you can remember? Anybody, just say it out loud. I'm what? Big bell-bottom jeans. Okay. We're still back in the 70s. See, lots of great stuff. You ever heard of crowding into phone booths? I was actually before my time, although I do remember phone booths. Some of you right now are probably thinking, what is a phone booth? Anybody, what's a fad? Beanie Babies. That's actually one of the ones I had written down. That's good. Cabbage Patch Dolls. Yeah? Oh, okay. We're having a moment. We're remembering the name of our Cabbage Patch Dolls right now.
Slap bracelets.
Slap.
Color t-shirts.
Oh, wow. Tie-dyes. All right. Jazzercise. Mosh pit surfing. Some of you just got a look of guilt across your face, just right. Oh, no. MySpace. What?
Yeah, you'd be my
Somebody, I don't know who it was, I didn't bother looking it up, a number of years ago started a kind of fad, or maybe it was a movement, or perhaps it was just a commercial marketing campaign that was built around a concept articulated in just 4 simple words. What would Jesus do? Remember that? WWJD. It was everywhere. Billboards. Driving down the interstate, and there's a billboard, WWJD. Bracelets, bumper stickers, T-shirts. And admittedly, a number of people made money off of this idea. And I'm afraid, I think it kind of became eventually sort of a trite, shallow cliche to many people. It kind of lost its effectiveness. But doesn't it seem like a valid question? I mean, I understand if you're not a person who places your faith in Jesus, you might easily dismiss it as not being relevant for you. Fair enough. And even if you are a person of Christian faith and you do value the importance and significance of following in the footsteps of Jesus and his example, you still might easily sort of dismiss the question as being a kind of gimmick. And that's understandable too. But whether you're a person of faith on the one hand, or even if you're an atheist on the other hand, doesn't it make sense that if someone were to say, as many of us in this room do, I am a Christ follower, then it would seem like knowing how Jesus would think and how he would act and how he would treat people and what his values were would be a big deal. I mean, those things would be important, right? Because the truth is, we don't always do what Jesus would do. I don't. Do I have to leave now? There's a verse in the Bible, in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, that says this. It starts out and says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. And that would mean, of course, if and when the behaviors and customs of this world are in conflict with how you think God would have you live. And that's your decision to make generally. Let me quickly explain. You know, it's not my responsibility or right to tell you, you know what, you should not have a TV in your house. You shouldn't own a TV. Jesus didn't own a TV. That's a behavior or a custom of this world, so don't copy that. You should not have a TV. Oh, okay, that's not my job. And frankly, I don't think it's your job either. Obviously, Jesus didn't have a TV. On the other hand, there are some behaviors and customs of this world that might be a little more relevant, or that we might actually think about in terms, for example, just because your neighbor or your friend or your coworker or a relative, family member, or everybody else is committing adultery in an extramarital relationship, doesn't mean that you should defraud your wife or your husband by committing adultery, even if everybody else is doing it. Don't copy that. Okay, I just gave you two very different examples. Just one extremely ridiculous and one that we see taking place around us fairly regularly. And there's a whole lot of territory in between. There's a lot of gray area that you and I might come to different decisions on, and that's okay. Back to Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where it says next, after it says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world. And this is the part that I'm kind of focused on and excited about. It says, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. God wants to change the way we think so that we will think more like Him. So that we will understand better what Jesus would do. What would Jesus do? So that we would understand what Jesus would do in certain situations, how He would act, how He would treat people, what His values would look like. How would Jesus think? Now, I don't know how many versions of Christianity you may have been exposed to. This might be the first time you've ever heard any kind of teaching about the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Or like me, you may have been around church for a long time. I think my dad was a pastor. I've been going to church since before the 70s. I think I've heard just about every version of the gospel known to man, from one extreme to the other. I mean, I think I've heard it all. Following Jesus is awesome. No, following Jesus is hard. Following Jesus is easy. Following Jesus means giving up everything that is fun. No, following Jesus is fun. Seriously, it's a wonder that I don't suffer from some form of spiritual schizophrenia. I've heard so many different, takes on, what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to think and what it's supposed to be like. And for what it's worth, to be fair, I think there's at least a little bit of truth in all of those versions, because life is like that. Some days are good and some days not so much. Nobody stays on top of the mountain all the time. Sometimes it seems like, man, I wouldn't want to do anything other than follow Jesus. And other days you might feel like, maybe I think I might just like to live like the devil for a while. I mean, I hope not, and I hope you don't give in to that. But I mean, sometimes the range of emotion, because life comes and goes and things happen. So in all of this variety, with all of life's changes and all of life's ups and downs, is there anything that is consistent? Yes, there is. And it is Jesus. Specifically, it is in how Jesus lived and how He thought and how He treated people and what His values were. The things that He put value on. So, I don't know if you're aware of this. Gonna just break the news to you. We're coming up on Easter in 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today. That's just a heads up. You're welcome. And as we start to think about Easter, this business of thinking like Jesus and acting like Jesus and treating people the way Jesus would begins to take on a more sobering tone. In fact, now that I've kind of ruined everything by, telling you, you got to start getting ready for Easter, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, Jesus died horribly, terribly, brutally. Is that what I'm supposed to do? What if I'm not ready to die yet? I don't want to die. Well, can I just tell you that I think Jesus is far more interested in how you live than in whether or not you're ready to die. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're both important. But think about this. Before Jesus died, which is kind of what we tend to think of first, or close to the first thing that we think about when we think of, he died on the cross. That's who Jesus is. That's what he did. Before he died, Jesus spent over 3 years teaching his disciples how to live, teaching them how to act and how to think and how to treat people and what was important and where real values were. And almost everything he taught them was counter to what they knew. It was the opposite of what they were used to. It was radical stuff. He taught them to respect women, which was way out of step with the culture of the day. He taught them to treasure children. He taught them to care about the poor. He taught them to care about and take care of sick people and people who were injured and disabled or crippled. And all of this was really pretty radical, even revolutionary type stuff. In fact, the religious leaders of the day were really pretty uncomfortable with most of this stuff because it didn't fit in their system. Now, if you want more information about this is just a little brief commercial timeout. I recommend that you read John Ortberg's book, Who is This Man? It is a great read about how the early followers of Jesus literally changed their culture and the world because they listened and remembered what Jesus had told them, and it changed the way they thought. He taught them to not hate people who were different. He taught them to forgive people who had wronged them, people who had offended them and hurt them, betrayed them, lied to them, abandoned them. Jesus taught them to forgive all of those people. And that was a tough one. Forgiving people. That was tough. Still is, isn't it? Go ahead. It's tough. It's not easy. In Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, Peter asks a big question. He said to Jesus, they were talking about a related subject, and he said, how many times do I need to forgive? And then he added, 7 times? Now, Peter thought he was being generous. He thought he was going way overboard. And there was a reason for that. Because in the Old Testament, I know one of them is in the book of Amos, but I think there's at least 1 or 2 other instances. There was a teaching that said that God expected us to forgive people 3 times. 3 times. And so when Peter said 7 times, he said, how many times do I need to forgive? 7 times? He thought, he was going like, that's over twice as many as, we have to, He thought Jesus might say, oh, come on, Peter, now, don't be ridiculous. He wasn't prepared for what Jesus said. Jesus said, no, not 7 times, 70 times 7. Oh, this was, what? The ones who, didn't pay attention in math class started grabbing for their calculators saying 7. Jesus wasn't saying that you had to forgive someone 490 times and then you were in the clear to do whatever you wanted to do to them. No, Jesus was teaching a concept. He was teaching them, number one, first of all, just forgive. Don't count, just forgive. Let that be your MO. Let that be your guiding principle in life. When somebody does something, forgive them. Number 2, quit keeping score. Because, we can kind of manipulate the score, can't we? We can always figure out a way to say, well, yeah, I still owe them one. Jesus said, quit keeping score. It's just going to get you in trouble. Just love and forgive. And he was also teaching them something that we know from mental health professionals and studies today. Unforgiveness is poison to your spiritual, mental, and emotional health. If you don't have faith in God, if you don't believe in God, this is true. Unforgiveness is poison to your system. And number 4, forgiveness and unconditional love contributes to happiness and joy. And then Jesus taught them to value everyone. And again, this was radical stuff. This was counter to everything that was normal in their culture. He said, don't worry about where they live or what their skin color is or what they look like or what kind of accent they have. Everyone has value. He taught them to value everyone. Even Judas. Judas? Remember Judas? For good reason. It's understandable. Out of all the 12 disciples, there was one disciple who is the most reviled and despised and disrespected of them all. And we know who it is. Nobody names their kid Judas. And yet, Jesus taught them to value everyone, and he demonstrated it too. Even Judas had value. Think about this. Jesus knew, but Judas ate too. Have you ever thought about this? On the night before Jesus died, again, remember, we're coming up on Easter. What happens before Easter? The night before Jesus died, when Jesus was getting ready to have a final meal with his disciples, the Last Supper, Jesus knew. He goes into that room with his disciples, and he knows he is going to be betrayed. He knows it is Judas who will turn against him. He knows that he has been sold out for a handful of silver, stabbed in the back by someone that he has poured his life into. Yet in that room, hours before his death, Jesus included Judas. Judas ate too with everyone else. Jesus fed Judas too. Jesus prayed for Judas too. Jesus Jesus knelt at Judas' feet and washed his feet too. I'm going to be honest with you. I struggle to fathom that kind of love. A love that would feed the mouth that deceived you and lied to you. A love that would wash the treasonous feet of the traitor. A love that could forgive even the vilest of betrayals. I honestly struggle to comprehend it. And then suddenly, I realize that I'm Judas. I have betrayed him. I have denied him. I have sinned against him. I put him on that cross and walked away. And in that moment, I'm so thankful and altogether overwhelmed that Judas ate too. Jesus still loved me. In spite of all I've done, he still loved me. In spite of every sin, he still forgave me. He still included me, just like he did Judas. And then I have to ask, could I do that? Okay, remember the billboards and the bumper stickers, WWJD. You know, sometimes I wish I didn't know what Jesus would do, but it's pretty clear what Jesus would do. Could I do that? Would I do that? Am I willing to do what Jesus did? Am I willing to do what Jesus would do? If Jesus were in my shoes, if Jesus knew what Brad did to me, would Jesus forgive him? If Jesus knew what your spouse did, or your parents did, or your child did, or your coworker did, what would Jesus do? What did Jesus do? Knowing what he knew, knowing everything about Judas, Jesus still valued Judas. He valued Judas enough to include him with the rest of the group. He didn't kick him out. This is in violation of like every how to run a successful organization training manual ever written. You got a traitor, you got somebody who's not on board with the values, you just get rid of them. Jesus valued Judas enough to keep on teaching him. He valued him enough to feed him. He valued him enough to wash his feet. He loved, always, all the time, everyone, even Judas, even when he knew everything about Judas. And then, actually now, right now, this morning, I have the audacity to ask you, are you willing to do what Jesus would do? To do that. To sit down with your Judas and feed him. To pray for him. To wash her feet. Are you willing to love the Judas in your life? Are you willing to love the people in your life that are really hard to love? Simply because that's what Jesus did? Simply because Jesus loved you and loves you even when you don't deserve it? I'm asking you that, and I continually ask myself that, because that, I believe, is what it means to be a Christ follower. That's what it means to be a Christian. That does sound hard, doesn't it? Does anyone do that? I mean, really? 21st century, we're kind of a long ways away from the cross and the garden and, and all that stuff. Does anybody do that like today? Not in the Bible, in real life. Not Jesus or his disciples, but like real people. Does anybody do that? I want to tell you a story. about a real person, a girl. She was born and grew up in rural Arkansas in the early 1900s, and her name was Flossie. It was a different time, a different culture, a different America. It was a heavily male-dominated patriarchal era where men had all the power. Those were the good old, no, I'm just kidding. Men had all of the power. Women were an accessory, a possession. They had a lot of responsibilities and very little in the way of rights. In 1925, at the age of 17, Flossie hitched her wagon to a young man named Carlton, and they got married in a place called Dardanelle, Arkansas. Anybody ever been to Dardanelle, Arkansas? Don't worry about it. Carlton was a good-looking young man with a certain charm about him. He was also an ambitious, hard-working farmhand with big dreams and stars in his eyes. That wasn't the only thing in his eyes. He was a man. By 1938, after 13 years of marriage, they were the parents of 6 young children, 4 boys, 2 girls. When one day Carlton came home and broke the news to Flossie that he was divorcing her and leaving her with the 6 children. See, he had been having an affair with the teenage daughter of the man that he worked for, and now she was pregnant. And so he was going to marry her. There may or may not have been a shotgun involved, but he was going to marry her. Flossie's 30 years old, and she's got 6 children, all under the age of 12, in the middle of the Great Depression. Within a few days, Flossie's father arrived with a truck and transported all 7 of them, Mommy and the 6 children, back to the home where she had grown up. Not much of a, celebratory homecoming. And that's what happened to Flossie. That's what Carlton did to her. But that's not where the story ends. One day, a few months into this new existence, some of the children were playing outside their new home, living with their grandparents and their mother. They were outside playing around the house when 9-year-old Bobby Sam, the second oldest of the 6 kids, heard the sound of a familiar truck approaching through the trees of the winding road to the house. And before he could even see the truck, he ran into the house screaming, "Daddy's home! Daddy's home!" The adults thought he was imagining some kind of fantasy, playing a sort of a make-believe game about his daddy coming home. They thought he was making it up, but he wasn't. It was indeed Carlton. You see, it had turned out that the new teenage bride was not in fact pregnant. And the prodigal husband-father had seemingly come to his senses, or at least had a moment of moral and responsible clarity. And he went to the courthouse to obtain an annulment of his new marriage. And he had made the drive, and now he was here. On bended knee, he begged Flossie to forgive him. He professed his eternal faithfulness and love to her and her alone from that day forward. And then, with trembling and fear for his life, literally, he also begged for forgiveness from Flossie's father, Adam Hampton, a towering man with a notorious temper. and a penchant for violence. He was asking a lot. What should she do? Don't answer, please. What would you do? I said don't answer. Do you and I think he deserved a second chance? Do you and I think he deserved forgiveness? It doesn't matter what we think. Only one person could make that call. And Flossie forgave him and agreed to marry him again. And then Adam forgave him and called him son. Carlton slept in his truck until a new marriage license could be obtained. And they were once again united in matrimony. In time, they had 4 more children, all girls. Now, I never knew that story until I was an adult. But I know that story. Because little Bobby Sam, that 9-year-old boy, was my father. And Carlton was my grandfather. And Flossie was my beloved Grandma McGarity. I believe she was following the example of her Savior, Jesus Christ, when she extended grace and forgiveness to someone she loved who had betrayed her and wounded her so deeply and severely. Was she angry? Yeah. Was she hurt? Of course. Was she devastated? Absolutely. All of those things. But she chose. You know, she wasn't following her emotions. She chose forgiveness. She chose love. She chose to extend grace. Grace is unmerited favor. Sometimes when we don't give people what they deserve, the results are far more impactful than we can possibly comprehend. So what was the impact of her decision to forgive, her commitment to forgive, and a life that was built on faith and love and forgiveness, a life committed to letting God change the way you think? Well, the first thing, of course, was that she gave Carlton, a young man whose future life was hanging in the balance, a chance at redemption. She forgave him. And I've got to tell you, I'm so glad that she gave him that second chance. Why? Well, I don't think my dad would have been the man that he was. The dad that I knew, if his mother hadn't made the decision to forgive his father. The trajectory of his life, as well as all of his siblings, would have been radically different. And I wouldn't have the wonderful memories of my grandpa that I have if she hadn't redeemed him with her forgiveness. I told you, I didn't know that story until I was an adult. Growing up, my grandpa was a heroic, legend-like figure to me. He became a wealthy rancher in Arizona. He was a generous, church-going, God-fearing man who doted on his grandchildren. I have a picture of me that I found this week, 4 years old, sitting on one of his tractors with him. I remember, that's a memory that I have, that I thought I was king of the world. And none of that would have been possible. I wouldn't have those memories if Flossie hadn't forgiven him. She gave him a second chance, and she gave my dad and his siblings a chance to have their dad again. And she modeled the example and the redemptive power of forgiveness, which she could then pass on, or which they could then pass on to my generation. She literally gave my 4 youngest aunts a chance to live, as well as their children, who became my cousins, who I know and love dearly. She saved our family. It wasn't just about her, and it wasn't even about just my dad. How different would my life have been? She saved our family. She could have turned him away. No one would have blamed her, right? No one would have blamed her. It might have made her feel good for a little while to give him what he deserved, to hold on to that anger and that hurt. She would have been justified according to the way everyone else thinks. But she didn't. She made the decision to love and forgive and extend grace, unmerited, undeserved favor. And it not only brought healing to her heart and a broken marriage, it saved an entire family for generations to come. That's what can happen. That's a taste of what can happen when we let God change the way we think. Is it possible that maybe your life and the lives of the people around you, your family, the people you love and care about, is it possible that maybe they would benefit if you allowed God to help you to change the way you think? Without getting too personal, let me tell you what I think. I don't think that the world needs any more anger. I don't think that the world needs any more hate or revenge or me first thinking. What the world really needs more of is love. Intentional, unconditional love, and forgiveness and mercy and compassion and grace, unmerited and undeserved. That's the way that Jesus thinks. And that's how he wants to teach us to think. And it starts with you and me. It's not always easy or even normal, but it can change the world. It can change the world. It can change your world. It can change your future and your family. It can change you wonderfully and gloriously if you will let God change the way you think. Let me pray for you. Lord, the reason we're here today is because somehow there is a sense in each of us that we're not complete, that we're not perfect, that there are still some things that we can learn and grow into, that we can do better, that we can be better. There is a sense that perhaps we need more of you in our life. And yet sometimes the things that we need are not entirely comfortable for us. Lord, I pray for each and every person in this room right now who may be struggling with whether or not they want to let you help them to change some of the ways that they think and some of the values that they have. Because for some of us right now, it may seem really hard. Lord, I pray that somehow you'll help us to see beyond the challenges and the difficulties and the obstacles, and help us to have faith in you, that by following you and trusting in you, you will do wonderful things in us and through us. That you can not only help us change, but through our openness to you, you can change the world around us. I pray, Lord, that you will receive glory and honor from all of that. We ask all of these things, and we're so grateful to you. In your name, amen. Thank you. God bless you.